start off with the typical question. What are some of your thoughts from watching that short documentary?
It's crazy to think how different Oklahoma would be if there wasn't so much racism.
Was that new historical knowledge to you, or
Yeah, I had no idea about Black Wall Street in downtown Tulsa.
anybody else?
I learned about that this year on Instagram.
Yeah. Anybody know about it before coming? You people
I just didn't know how small it was.
currently?
Yeah. I went to that house that they showed.
Did you? That's pretty cool. Yeah, I know my husband said he did not learn it in school at all. And I mean, Miami is only an hour-ish, hour and a half-ish from Tulsa. Had never heard about it. Yeah. What else?
I thought it was interesting. It was mostly out of Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one reason I wanted to show it to y'all. When I saw the episode, I thought that was pretty cool, just how relevant it would be. And I don't know if y'all saw there at one point when they were having the dinner, saw the guy in the OSU hat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I thought that was pretty cool. What else?
I actually went to junior college with Assembly Hall.
Really?
Yeah, so that was kind of cool.
Very neat. I was wondering if anybody would know any of the folks on there. What's one of the big things y'all want to talk about from it? Again, kind of thinking about everything we've talked about this semester. What was brought up in this documentary that you're like, ooh, that's a good example of?
I think recently the profit margin and how the supply chain, the further it goes, the less money the farmers are able to make. So that one lady just said, she would rather do that much more work because it puts so much more money in her pocket.
Yeah. So if we think back to the beginning of this month, we talked about kind of the different market options that we have, right? Like we can do kind of the big commercial interstate markets, or we have what they called in this film the direct to consumers. What are your thoughts about those different approaches and how they talked about them in this film? Things you agree with, things you don't agree with?
I thought it was interesting that he brought about the different types of producers. Like there was the commodity producer and then the small scale, where she did almost everything.
Yeah.
And I also kind of feel like, they didn't necessarily say this, but like the people that are inheriting the big farms, like they don't really have a choice but to be a commodity farmer. Like their operations aren't going to allow them to sell directly to consumers because they have so much that they have to operate with.
Yeah.
And then when he said, he was just like, I have no other choice, like that's just what we do, you go back and take over the family farm. I had 7 boys in my class and 5 of them, all of them are taking over the family farm. And you just see that, like it's nice that they're willing to, but it's gonna get to the fact that nobody's willing to. But so many local farmers don't want to sell out to big companies.
And so what are some of those concerns about losing the family farm? Why are they not wanting to sell to bigger companies, or why are they not wanting to just sell to anybody else in particular?
Well, the part where they were saying that we're going to be buying our food from China that's grown in the United States, like that, like with China owning it, like that's not going to stimulate our economy as well if all of the actual like profit, I guess, is leaving our country even though the work is happening here.
There's still some benefit to the local economy, and that
Yeah.
people will still have jobs, what have you,
Right.
but, you know, again, who's getting the tax benefits of it, right? It's
Right.
going overseas versus them being here, even though it's food being produced here. I have a friend that she's kind of going through this issue with her family right now. Her father passed away. Her father was supposed to inherit the family farm that her family's been farming now for 3 generations. But because he passed away, and there were some other issues like family trust stuff, her dad's sisters have chosen to sell the family farm instead of letting it pass down to her and her brother.
That happened to my grandpa.
And it is actually in the process of, like, they divided up all of the acreage in even smaller lots, and it's in a sale right now, and they chose to do an internet-based land auction so that foreign people could, all with the hopes of increasing the profit they get off of the land, versus letting it continue to be land that stays in the family. So that's a big concern of theirs right now.
So that happened in our family, not selling out of, like, to international buyers. But when my great-grandma died, like, my grandpa was operating the farm all his life, and then his siblings wanted the money from the land. And then, like, real estate came in instead of, so, like, now there's a Walmart where part of the farm used to be, and they're putting a neighborhood in where part of the farm used to be. So it's like, we're losing that ag land because his siblings wanted their money out of it instead of continuing to produce something.
So what's one of those connections we can make between that story of trying to maintain farms in the family currently and the story of the first family, the black family, and the loss of farms? Are y'all able to make the connection there between those two stories? How are they connected?
Well, they're working really hard to try and keep their farm in their family, right?
They're trying to keep it
And keep it
or
afloat.
get it back.
Yeah.
So we look at just the black community and the number of black farmers in our country over 100 years. How much farmland was lost? Did anybody write that number down?
They said there was 14% of black people that owned their land and everything.
Wasn't it like 90, like in the 90 or
97 or
99%?
something?
Yeah. So black people own, of all farmland in the United States back in 1920, black farmers owned 14% of those farms. Now less than 0.5%. They lost a lot of land. Why is it hard to get land back?
Once you start using it for something else, then it's hard to help the soil get back to where it needs to be.
So just value, usage of the land. Does land value increase or decrease? Always. My papa said, if you want to have a good asset, have land, because it's never going to lose its value. It's only going to go up over time. So if you lose land, how easy is it going to be to get back? And what things contributed to making it hard for black farmers to get their land back? What do you need to be able to buy land? Loans. How do you get a loan? Through a bank. And how does the bank decide whether to give you a loan or not?
Application process.
Application process. And based off of your capital or ability to pay it back. In the early 1920s, did black farmers have a lot of assets or money saved up that would have given them the credit needed to get a loan? Why not?
They weren't even able to have anything for very long before that.
Most of them weren't even a generation removed from being slaves, right? So they're already at a disadvantage. But now imagine taking it to current farms. That's, the family from Tonkawa. If they lose their family farm, are they going to be able to get that land back or the same amount of land back? Why not? Because what generation's living on that farm? Fifth. And so how much do you think that land may have cost, hypothetically, 5 generations ago?
Probably almost free because of the heck did Oklahoma do?
Land run. That's a whole other complication, right? We could add to this conversation, right? Sometimes it's hard. I'm surprised we talk about it as openly as we do, but people will say, like, I'm the such and such generation since the land run. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I would brag about that. That's hard.
One of my friends, they had like 10,000 acres, and I don't know how many generations they are, but it's from the land run.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're a land run farm, you, after a certain amount of time, you get a really cool sign for a centennial farm. It's
How do y'all
like a
feel?
big deal in Oklahoma.
How do y'all feel about that?
I mean, if people are around it, I don't know. There's like 20 in our area.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
It's very complicated, right? So they may have even gotten the land free, like that's a reality here in Oklahoma. Or again, at a very low cost, that again, if you were to go buy back 10,000 acres now, what would you need to do that?
Sell my heart.
Sell your heart.
I think that'll pay for it.
I don't know if there's enough plasma you could sell.
You're probably right.
Right? So it's just not as easy to acquire land today if you don't already have it and aren't going to be able to inherit it. Like, that's just one of kind of the realities. When we talk about privileges, there's all different kinds and we all have different privileges. And land ownership, would y'all say that's a privilege? And so it's very complex in the sense of it can kind of be paradoxical that it's like you may feel like you may own land and yet be in a situation as a farmer living paycheck to paycheck, but still have that privilege of having land ownership where you're able to get loans to keep doing what you're doing.
Like, I know in my town, like, someone could be like scraping by, but we call them like land rich. Like, they've got all the land surrounding Van Alstyne, but like, that's it. Which is a lot, and they make money, but they like break even.
Yeah. Well, think about it. If you're in a pinch, can't you lease that land? And then you have additional income. If you're really in a pinch, you might sell off an acre or two, right? I mean, land ownership is a big deal that I think we just don't talk about, you know, how much that can contribute to generational wealth. And so I think that's one like undercurrent that was kind of happening in that whole documentary is how is generational wealth passed down? And how do people accumulate that? And have there been some systemic things that have affected some people being able to have that generational wealth versus others? And I think that ties back to Breyer's comment of what would Oklahoma look like if we had allowed Black Wall Street to really accumulate and pass on that generational wealth that was there. What do y'all think?
Well, within that same breath, at the exact same time in Oklahoma and in the U.S., Native Americans were also going to do the same exact thing. And there might not have been like a Black Wall Street that Native Americans had, but most of Oklahoma was Native American and African American owned. And now you look at it today, and I just think it's crazy, that shift, because my research was over Native American and their agriculture and their history with the U.S. government, and it's like the amount of land we continuously took from them is insane. Like, when you think about it, half of our country down the middle shouldn't even be accessible to us, because we gave, past the Mississippi, we gave all of that to the Native Americans, being like, hey, go out there, farm it, you're fine. And then we were like, I'm going to take a little bit here, a little bit over here. And the same experience happened with African American farmers. So there's like multiple subsets of groups in America that were never allowed to kind of kickstart like some of our other generations were allowed to do.
So, you know, it's obviously, these conversations are always hard because it's like, well, we weren't alive in 1920, right? But yet, the decisions and things that happened in 1920 are impacting farmers today still. Like, it didn't solve any problems, right? Are there, you know, just from kind of watching that documentary, are there any changes that could be made or anything that we can do to help people continue their family farms, help people continue to get back into agriculture, help people continue to be able to purchase land for agricultural purposes?
I mean, when the one lady said that if, like, bread cost 5 cents more a loaf, and that was given to the farmer also, like, that's, you know, they're only making 5 cents now, so that's doubling what they're making, and it's literally only 5 more cents for the consumer. And I feel like that's kind of like what we talked about with, like, poverty. Like, if we just pay a few more cents on things, like, that stimulates money in so many different areas for so many different people.
Absolutely. Do you think y'all would notice a 5-cent change on the loaf of bread?
No.
Do y'all ever notice price fluctuations
No.
on anything?
Do on milk.
On milk?
Yeah, I
Because
can
they're
watch it on
pretty,
milk.
Yeah.
Meat products.
meat products.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Dairy.
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
the only time I ever noticed was just when COVID happened, and I was just like, whoa, my grocery bill is like way up here
Toilet paper
now.
went up again.
Yeah, my Walmart sold it for like $20 at one point.
What?
Yeah, like they inflated it that much. Like it was like right when you walked in, like toilet paper like in the midst, like the middle of it. It was like $20.
Supply and
And people
demand,
were
baby, supply
buying.
and demand.
Tell you, after looking at land prices, I'm gonna look into selling feed pics or something. I was literally just looking for like land in Oklahoma, and like for 80 acres, it was like over $1 million. I was like, yeah, I'm out.
That's how I spent my evening yesterday, was looking at land.
Yes.
And I
I
feel
looked at
like
it, I was like,
the smallest houses, like they're like a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, are like 7,500, and yet you get like a bigger house on smaller property, and it's like, oh, it's only like 150, and I'm like, y'all, I can't even afford that, like.
And y'all know that Oklahoma has some of the lowest land prices in the United States,
Yeah.
right?
Texas, and like you just literally go 30 minutes over the border and it's insane. Like my family has like 100 acres and it's literally just like a hobby. Like that's what my grandparents do. It's like a hobby for them. And like my uncle has already said that, because it's my uncle and my mom, and he's already said that like he wants to like sell his half when my grandparents pass away. And so like my mom and I have already like started saving to like be able to buy that back. And like we can't even fathom the amount of like how much we are going to have to pay just so we don't lose 50 acres of like just like tradition.
Right. Yeah, there's still some areas in Oklahoma, and even around here in Stillwater, that you can get for about 10,000 an acre. But I can tell you, like in Florida right now, you're probably looking at 40,000 an acre for land. And so the thought of going in and trying to buy a substantial amount to farm to be profitable is really, really hard if you didn't already own it. Or you're just gonna be paying for it your entire life and not actually make an actual profit.
And then your kids are gonna have to pay on it. Like, that is what I was mentally thinking, like, I'm gonna have to pay on it, my kids are gonna have to pay on it, the grandkids are gonna have to pay on it, like,
And who knows what interest rates will be.
yeah.
My mom and I just moved a block over in Burlington, and we lived on an acre of land, and everyone's like, oh, when are they selling it? And it's kind of fun listening to all the farmers like want it at the C-store, and I know my mom's never gonna sell it because she likes hearing them argue about who's gonna take it. And the prices just keep going up. She's like, if it ever gets to like the $500,000, because like people are willing to spend that on this acre of land, she's like, I'll go for it. And I was like, that's all people are waiting for, is like just the right amount.
Well-
Everything's for sale for the right price.
Well, and that makes me think of one thing that the black farmer said, that he's like, you know, our family's chosen to try to do what we can to keep, and it's 40 acres, keep the 40 acres in our family. And they're like, we realize we could sell it and make $1 million, but which is gonna last longer? The $1 million we make off of it, or the 40 acres? And he's like, $1 million would have done been spent.
Right.
Anybody catch that or think about that?
So I've spent the entire semester working on, like, my presentation yesterday is like the new and beginning farmer program that is like, it's a fund from the USDA. And like, it's like a really good opportunity for like people who are wanting to do like the low scale, this is how I'm interpreting it, like the low scale, like directly to consumers, like the last, like young lady we watched. But like, I'm thinking back, and I know there are programs, but like this is something that's being pushed really hard, and it's like it's only like a small amount of people that can use it, and it's like not helping anyone that's previously farmed before. Like you have to be removed like 10 years. You can't have like any ties. So like I could not do it because like my family farms hay on just like a plot of land. And so it just makes me wonder, like, why aren't we helping the people that have been there already?
What are the qualifications for that program?
If you hadn't asked, I could have told you. So it's, and they do, like, it's not advertised, but like said that, like, depending on like gender and race and like location and like the operation you're wanting to do, you're more likely to like receive the funds from the program. But it's like, you can be of any age. You can, it's like all across, But in like Oklahoma, you have to be like 10 years removed, like no ties in the last 10 years. And then there's one other thing. I can't remember what it is. But it's like, it's hard to do because of like all of the paperwork. Like when we were doing the presentation, we were like, one of the girls, and it actually has something that's very similar to it, and she was like, I looked at this one, but it's so hard to receive, and she was like, they're not supporting like anything in like my hometown hardly. So she was like, what am I supposed to do? Like, why would I not just go next door to the next bank who's doing these loans? And so it was just kind of like it was a hard semester for that.
Well, and it'd be interesting, you know, beyond even just saying, hey, why are y'all saying you have to be 10 years removed? This could be an issue for any young farmer inheriting a farm. But also, y'all heard about the issues with USDA loans, the systematic racism. That, again, like, I know sometimes these things can seem very emotionally driven, but that is a factual thing that happened in our history. And like they mentioned, it was an internal audit. It wasn't somebody coming in and criticizing. There kept being so many complaints. They did an internal audit, and literally when they saw the results were like, oh shit, we can't believe this has been happening within the USDA. Like, it's a big deal. And like they mentioned, even though they saw it happen and they agreed to pay back some of the, or give loans out to people who had applied that didn't get them, there's still people who have not received the loan that they applied for that in that process lost their farms. There, you can find a lot of stories, especially in the North Carolina area. That seemed to be where a lot of the corruption was happening. A lot of farmers lost their land in that area. But it'd be interesting to see, like, maybe there's some systematic things that are where people are qualifying that maybe they weren't intentional, but certain requirements that they're having are causing people not to get those loans, and it may be affecting some groups more than others.
Well, like, I'm thinking about like my friend who graduated from OSU, got a degree, and is going back to farm. And like, that's great, but at the same time, and like, lucky for him, like, he's had the opportunity to like grow up with his grandpa and like learn it. But like, it just, like, when they were talking about the 22-year-old who just took over the farm, they're like, you need a girlfriend first, like that family. Like, it just makes me frustrated with like the time I've spent on this, like learning about this program I spent all year, and when in reality it's like people that have been like pinching pennies for decades, and like they're still not receiving like the benefits they need because they've grown up in a farming family.
Well, and then I also think like the 10 years removed kind of just like blows my mind, because I'm thinking like, you know, if I want to have a fresh start, like, and whatever, like my parents farmed and his parents farmed, but like we're starting our own farm. You know what I'm
It's
saying?
not
Like,
connected to their
yeah.
equity.
So like here we are trying to start and we can't because we can't get that loan. That's kind of like scary.
Just in the junior college that I went to, I worked on the farm and everything, and just like dealing with like some of the paperwork, because like I'd also have to be in the office too, and talking with my boss. They lost over $1 million, you know, and just in the past few years, just on farming that. You know, it's crazy.
Yeah, I like tell their brother was like, and that's why I sell insurance. Crop insurance is a good business to be
Right.
in.
Well, that's like he was talking about how he lost $200,000 in one night.
Right.
And like, yeah, insurance hopefully covers some of that, but like at the end of the day, what the hell?
You've already bought the seed. that
The
you've got-
fuel,
the-
like,
The fertilizer,
I would cry.
yeah. One thing I want to make sure we talk about that I think is interesting, and it is tied directly to some of y'all's supply chains. The farmer from Tonkawa talked a lot about the loss of market power among farmers. And he brought up the 1921 Packers and Stockyard Act. Have any of y'all learned or heard about that before? So the purpose of that act in Packers and Stockyard, what does it make it sound like it's involved with? Animal agriculture. Back in the early 1900s, again, industrialization, this emphasis on efficiency and more production. We started to see this huge consolidation in the animal meat industry. So, essentially, larger farms buying out smaller farms, getting bigger, bigger, bigger. They control the market, they're controlling the price, and then people who were making their decision to still remain small, weren't able to compete, da-da-da-da. So they passed this act in 1921, and what it does is it is a regulation on agriculture. And the purpose of the regulations were to limit consolidation. So just like we don't want to see a monopoly, we don't want the only type of phone that we buy to be Apple. We don't want the only person that we can get internet access from in Stillwater to be
Suddenly.
Suddenly.
It's the only one.
Right, we don't want monopolies. We don't want to see monopolies in agriculture either, because if we're supposed to be functioning as a free market, we need competition, right? And so this regulation was a way to say, okay, we understand competition's going to cause some people to buy and sell out, but we don't want that to be everyone's end game, because if we start getting to that point, we're going to have a monopoly and we don't have a free market anymore. But then what happened?
They stopped regulating it.
In the 1980s, we got very anti-regulation.
But yeah, we'll regulate other things that probably shouldn't, not saying shouldn't be regulated, but they're more hard to, like, I don't know.
As a whole, that 1980s, and it was part of the Reagan administration, there was a push to say, no more regulation, all regulation's bad. And so it didn't get rid of the law, but we stopped enforcing it. Now what's happening? If you are studying the supply chain in meat, what happened during COVID? We've talked about it a little bit.
Prices went up.
Prices went up. Why did meat prices go up so high?
Because the big processing plants got shut down.
Big processing plants got shut down. We have had a lot of consolidation in the market since the 1980s because of that deregulation. And now we're almost back in that same position where local producers are like, we have absolutely no say in where we're able to process, what we're getting as our bottom dollar back, right? And so anybody involved in the beef industry been a part of this conversation during COVID? And what's been going on? It's been pushed a lot by states like Montana and Wyoming. Anybody seen anything related to it? A lot of producers have been coming back together to say we need to start regulating packers and stockyards again. That we need, like the guy said, we have the law on the books. It's not a new law that needs to be created, but it needs to be reinforced. I think that would be something really interesting for y'all to just kind of do your own research and learn a little bit more about. Hans Hunt, he was a graduate student here. He's from Wyoming, and he actually is
He's so freaking cool. He's very intelligent.
Tell us about Hans.
He's very different, very unique. And so he's like almost so smart, he's too smart.
Mm-hmm.
I had a class with him, and I remember he would answer every question, and the stupid boys in the back who are insecure of their knowledge would laugh because he was that intelligent. Like, he could answer any question any day of the week, basically. And so it was almost like he was just too smart to be in class. Like, that's just what I thought. Like, I just thought he was so intelligent. And
Not even 30 years old.
Yeah.
His family ranches in Wyoming, like a large cattle ranch,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a state representative.
Yeah.
So, very interesting, but his family is actually pretty involved in this movement of saying we need to give a little bit more market power back to producers and provide more options of where they're able to have their meat processed and where they're able to sell it. So,
Something they did in our area, because that's all we have is wheat and cattle. All of the small line butchers in our area, farmers put money towards getting them bigger freezers, because everywhere around us, like, they have nowhere to store their meat or anything. So they went together, and so within a 2-hour radius, like, now there's more places for cattle to go.
that's pretty cool. And I mean, we've talked about before, like, how did this consolidation happen? A lot of it happened because it costs a lot to have these processing facilities. There's a lot of food safety regulations that they have to meet, which add increased costs. You know, there's reason, again, economies of scale in our current market system tend to weigh out. And that makes me think of the last farm that was talked about in that documentary, the direct-to-consumer. And she talked about the fact that, you know, how much more she's able to control the price because she's cutting out all those middlemen in what she does. And that sure, she doesn't have a ton of acres, she doesn't have 10,000 acres, but she can take a pig that would normally meat might sell for $3 a pound. She's making, what did she say?
$40.
$40 a pound. Very much this idea of locavore, this local foods movement that we talked about. What were y'all's thoughts about that? And were you like, I would have bought that at the farmer's market?
I also just thought it was funny that she said like that millennials are doing it because like that's the kind of the generation that I feel like encourages that movement, you know? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if you're at the farmer's market, you're buying stuff you're not gonna eat then. It's like, you know, you're gonna be hungry. Gotta buy something, I guess.
Yeah.
I think it was genius.
Oh, yeah, same.
Over at Fancy, we process a lot of cattle that people sell at the farmers markets here.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody makes burritos, good breakfast burritos, that's where I go. It's like all local pork and like homegrown eggs and like tomatoes, right? So I'll support it. Yeah.
Did you say cattle sold at farmers market?
Yeah, we have Wagyu that sells, and there's another place that does sell like steaks and stuff, plus chickens, and then another one just does chickens.
I really thought farmers markets were produce. Didn't know it was livestock.
Yeah. The one in the city also sells goat
See?
and lamb and turkey.
Yeah.
Y'all have trade days in Oklahoma?
Huh?
Y'all have like things called trades days in Oklahoma?
What?
So no.
I mean, I don't know.
We do.
Yeah. That's what that farmers market sounds like.
Yeah, we have trade days in like Alva.
Mhm. It's just like where people come and sell like handmade things, like goods.
Oh, like a trade
livestock.
show.
Like a what?
Like a trade show.
Yeah.
No. No, not where I'm from. It's a little raunchy.
I feel like the concept's the
Okay,
same.
okay.
I don't know what trade shows you're going to.
So we've reached our class time for today. Any last thoughts or things you want to say about the documentary? Or do y'all want some time to kind of mull over some more stuff and pick back up on it Thursday?
I
Mull on
thought
it?
it was like,
You
I
what?
thought it was weird how like, it took them 300, almost 400 days to get their application process, but for us, 30 days.
Literally, there were cases found in that investigation where people took applications and set them to the side and never looked at them, simply because a black person had brought that application in. Like very blunt, obvious
Why is
discrimination.
race on the application?
Why? That's a great question, Karen. Why do we do that?
I don't know.
They say it's for demographic purposes, like
Yeah.
to figure out, basically so they can reach their diversity quota. But
True.
Yeah, 2 of my cousins are loan officers. I called them after class.
Have a nice little phone call.
It's interesting though. I mean, y'all mentioned, you know, a lot of y'all said, well, I didn't really know about the race riots in Tulsa. You'd be surprised how many people in agriculture don't know about that loan issue in the USDA. So you may call your cousins and they may have no idea about it. Because, again, it's just not something that's been talked about a whole lot. And so now that y'all, again, this is kind of part of education. You're getting exposed to new information. So what do you do with it? Okay?
There's gonna be a museum over on Black Wall Street.
I think it's fantastic. There's still,
It's being made.
if y'all haven't kept up with the news, one of the big initiatives in this past year has been to find the mass graves. So there were a lot of, obviously, people killed that were never found. And what they have discovered is those people were buried in unmarked mass graves in Tulsa. And so they're still in the process of finding those graves and being able to identify the people killed and give dignity to them and their families.
They don't even know how many people were killed.
Right.
Yeah.
People
They
just
dug up
disappear.
like 5 graves
Huh?
so far. They dug up 5 graves so far, and each one of them had over like 3 to 6 people.
It's really sad. All right. See y'all on class Thursday.
Nuts.